Okay, without further ado, I'd like to introduce this webinar series today. If you are preparing or need to prepare for a disaster, we have the necessary tools and information just for you. Unfortunately, the state of Texas has seen some disasters this year, and especially with Hurricane Beryl that happened earlier in July. So we like to provide you with some insights from the Small Business Administration. My name is Ben Knorr. I'm with the Texas Restaurant Association. I'm very fortunate today to share the stage with Dylan McNally and David Elizondo, both of which are from the SBA. And so I'd like to do a quick intro, but before I begin, just some housekeeping items. Please note that if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll get to those either throughout the presentation or towards the end. And then this will also be recorded. So if you'd like to pass this along to your colleagues or say someone from your team didn't make it, we'll be able to share that with you. And then towards the end of or after the presentation's over as well, we'll be able to share with you this deck that has a lot of valuable resources for you in preparation for a natural disaster. So my first guest today, Dylan McNally. He is the acting director of the Recovery Division for SBA's Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience. He also serves as the recovery coordinator for Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, and is based in Houston. Regional recovery coordinators build relationships with local stakeholders pre and post disaster to support community needs in times of crisis. Dylan comes to SBA having led long-term disaster recovery operations, programs, and partnerships in the nonprofit sector. Dylan, welcome. Really glad to have you this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Awesome. And our next guest, David Elizondo. He is the district director. He oversees SBA programs and services throughout the district's 55 counties to facilitate information, training, and assistance to the small business community. Before joining the SBA, David was a program director for the Veterans Business Outreach Center at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. He also served in the United States Air Force as a security forces journeyman for more than 4 years. David, pleasure to have you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, without further ado, gentlemen, I will pass it off to the experts, and we'll get this thing kicked off. Thank you all for being here.
All right, so I'll start off with talking a little bit about SBA here in the state of Texas. So we are a independent federal agency. We have a total of 68 district offices nationwide, but specifically here in Texas, we have a total of 6 district offices. And as Ben is showing on the map here, we have offices in San Antonio, LRGV, Houston, Dallas-Fort Worth, West Texas, and El Paso. We also have a branch office in Corpus Christi, where I actually got my start with SBA. So a few of the folks here on the call today from the Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience, I got to work with them firsthand after Hurricane Harvey. So before we start about today's main topic, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about SBA and how we can help small business owners such as yourself. Next slide. So I know Ben's going to share this presentation with you all afterwards, but I did want to spend a little bit of time here to talk about the contact information. So if you want to do a little screenshot or cell phone, this is the contact information for the local district offices. So as you can see, 6 offices covering the Texas 254 counties. So here in the San Antonio, we do have a total of 55 counties that we cover. Next slide. So we started in 1953 under the Eisenhower administration to be the voice for the small business community. So even though we do disaster assistance, there's more to disaster assistance for SBA. So we also do small business counseling, loan assistance, and federal government contracting opportunities. And so before my colleague takes over, Dylan, talking about disaster assistance, one thing I wanted to emphasize before I turn it over to him is counseling assistance. So we have multiple resource partners in the community. So regardless if you're located in San Antonio, Houston, Austin, Dallas, El Paso, wherever you are, just know that you have SBA resource partners at your disposal. So this is nonprofit resource centers that provide technical assistance at no cost. So regardless if you're a startup business, you're an existing small business owner, you're looking to expand, SBA stands ready to assist you. Next slide. So just to kind of give you a geographic breakdown of how SBA works in the United States and in Texas. So there's a total of 10 regions. We in Texas fall under Region 6. And if you see that highlighted area of Texas, we do in fact cover a good portion of Central and South Texas. We are a small but mighty office here out of San Antonio, but we do cover Austin, Victoria, Laredo, and everything in between. And then as you can see there, we do have a little tiny branch office in Corpus Christi as well. So I know there might be some folks in Corpus Christi also on the call. Just know that there's SBA representation there as well. Next slide. So as I covered before, business counseling, guaranteed business loans. So when you talk to your bankers, talk about SBA loans as an option as well. We typically put a cap on interest rates, so you're not paying a very high amount of interest for a small business loan. Dylan's going to take over here shortly to talk about disaster loans and home loans as well, and then federal government contracting opportunities as well. So in case you do want to peruse federal government contracting opportunities, our office can also assist as well. Next slide. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Dylan to get to today's main topic presentation. Thank you very much, Ben. Dylan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate it. And special thanks to you for inviting me along today for this webinar. It's a real privilege to be here with all of you today. My dad actually had a catering company for 30 years, and I grew up in the kitchen and in the delivery van. So he closed down permanently when COVID hit. So needless to say, food service, and as it relates to disaster, it has a special place in my heart, and it's a huge part of why I took this job to support small businesses during times of crisis. So like I said, or rather like Ben said, my name's Dylan. I'm the acting director of the recovery division at SBA. And when I'm not in this acting role, I'm the recovery coordinator here in Region 6, which includes Texas. My colleague Corey Williams has also kindly agreed to join me for today's call. He's a top-notch public information officer with our disaster loan program, who'll be sure to answer any and all questions that you have about the active disaster declarations we have here in Texas from the storms that occurred in April and May, including the derecho in the Houston area, and then, of course, Hurricane Beryl. Next slide, please. So our conversation today will touch on 4 main things to help inform you about disaster resilience for small businesses, and then talk a little bit about declarations too, how to apply for loans, and then we'll have some, I'll give you a quick overview if we've got time about like what all it is that the recovery coordinators do and how we integrate different aspects of SBA programs to better support disaster survivors. Then we'll have some Q&A. Next slide. All right. So this is our disaster lending program that we'll get into. And on the next slide, we'll go over some key components of these primary resources. So the main way that SBA supports businesses after disasters is in the form of disaster loans. And a lot of people may or may not know this, but these disaster loans are, of course, eligible for small businesses to apply for, but we also support homeowners, renters, and private nonprofit organizations, as well as businesses of all sizes. So actually, about 80% of our disaster loan applicants are homeowners and renters. There are a few different types of disaster loans that are available. The most obvious one are business physical disaster loans. And these are loans to businesses to repair or replace disaster damaged property owned by the business. This might include real estate, inventories, supplies, machinery, equipment. Businesses of any size are eligible. Private nonprofits are also eligible. So, charities, churches, private universities. The second type of disaster loan that we have is what's called an economic injury disaster loan. You may hear us talk about it as EIDL. And these are working capital loans to help small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, small businesses engaged in aquaculture. I'll give a crawfish example from Louisiana here in a little bit. And most private nonprofit organizations. And this is to help meet ordinary and necessary financial obligations that can't be met as a direct result of the disaster. And these are intended to assist businesses and those private nonprofit organizations through the disaster recovery period. And then, of course, we've got home disaster loans, like I mentioned, to help homeowners and businesses cover their damages. So just to give you some context as to what our operations look like, in 2023, this is calendar year, we had 472 disaster declarations that SBA responded to. We approved over 25,000 disaster loans and dispersed over $1.87 billion. And there's a big push right now to focus on user experience and leveraging technology to make that experience better. We just did a revamp of the website, for example, and also the application process. And I was actually talking to a crawfish farmer in Louisiana, and she'd applied for an SBA loan in the past, prior to this revamp, and on her own accord, she brought up this year how much easier it's been to apply for a loan on the website and just interact with the portal there. So some good news for end users here. Next slide, please. So recently, in 2023, the current administration has also made some changes to the disaster loan program to improve access to disaster survivors. This includes increasing loan limits for the primary residence from $200,000 to $500,000, increasing loan limits for personal property from $40,000 to $100,000, and these limits hadn't been raised in decades. Okay, so it was about time. They removed an administrative limit on landscaping. They've extended the first payment deferment period from 5 to 12 months for all disaster loans. We've eliminated a restriction on property owners to use only disaster loan funds to mitigate against a similar disaster event that caused the damage to their home and business. I'll get into this a little bit more later on. And we removed the requirement that businesses submit financial statements with every reconsideration or appeal request. Next slide. So here you can see a further breakdown of the types of disaster loans that I just talked about. Folks often find this helpful as a visual, though, so I wanted to make sure I included it in here. And I'm also going to spend a little bit of time on the mitigation component. So mitigation measures taken before the next disaster have a hugely positive effect on a community's long-term recovery and also, your business's recovery. I want to emphasize that businesses, nonprofits, and homeowners can add up to 20% of the verified physical damage to their SBA disaster loan for mitigation purposes. And again, it doesn't have to be mitigation against the disaster that just happened or the type of disaster that just happened. So for example, if you just flooded, you can use this mitigation funding that's part of your disaster loan, that up to 20%, towards fortifying your business against future wind damage, which, as we all know, on the Gulf Coast and even some parts of the inland parts of the state, we've got multiple threats that we're facing when it comes to weather. So that's especially important. Another good thing for folks to take note of here is that if your business is a major source of employment, we may be able to raise that loan limit beyond $2 million. So this can be, important, not only to your business, but the community's recovery as we try to get those people back into their jobs. Next slide.
Dylan, I did have a question on this slide in particular. So for the business loans, say for our restaurant operators out there, if they have multiple, locations, multi-unit, if you will, and they have different EINs, are they able to apply separately for each business loan at that max amount of $2 million, or since it's the same group, how does that work?
What I do know, and Corey, I'll let you jump in here as well, is that it varies on a case-by-case basis as to how the business is actually structured. Corey, do you have any other further details that you like to give on that question?
Yes, so they can actually apply for multiple loans because we know that sometimes they have different franchise locations, so they can apply for multiple loans. The thing is, though, is that under the one entity, they usually use the cap of the $2 million as a cumulative total for all the different loans. So, but you are eligible to apply for multiple loans for multiple EINs.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Great question. Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
Okay, so why would you want to apply for an SBA disaster loan? There's a few reasons, but a few things that we always like to highlight are on this slide, and I'll read off a few of the ones that I think people resonate the most with. One, 12-month deferment, no accrued interest. Okay, that's huge. There's a low fixed interest rate. The loan terms are often longer than some private business loans. There's no prepayment penalty. There's no closing costs. There's no damage estimate needed to apply. And there's no obligation to take the loan if you're approved for it, right? So what we often counsel folks around is, hey, the disaster just hit. Maybe you're not quite sure what your insurance payout is going to be, or you're still trying to wrap your head around what resources could be available to you. It doesn't hurt to submit that application because there's no obligation to take the loan if you are indeed approved for it. You can make that decision later. Next slide. So you may be asking, am I eligible to receive an SBA disaster loan? We look at a few things for eligibility. The main one is whether or not the damaged property or the property that the business that received economic injury is in a declared area. We do this by county. We also look at your credit history. So applicants need to have a credit history that's acceptable to SBA. Applicants must also show the ability to repay all loans. On the insurance side, there are some insurance requirements. So hazard insurance is required for all secured loans. And then flood insurance is required by law for properties in a special flood hazard area. This includes floodplains and floodways. Next slide.
So just to confirm on that, Dylan, in order to obtain a loan, the injured business must have some sort of insurance through their broker or property insurance company, correct?
So borrowers have to obtain and maintain appropriate insurance. So Corey, jump in here if this is wrong, but my understanding is if you're applying for a loan and you don't have insurance, that's not necessarily a barrier. But once you do have that loan, you will be required to carry insurance based on what hazards might exist and where you are in the floodplain.
That's absolutely correct, Dylan. And one of the things we also try to encourage people, and we have the Business Resilience Guide, is for businesses, especially in those hurricane-prone areas like Texas, Louisiana, to make sure that they have business interruption insurance. So that is a big thing that we definitely encourage people to have in preparation for a potential disaster. But absolutely spot on, Dylan.
Yeah, not a requirement to apply, but there may be some requirements once you take out the loan.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Awesome.
So I've spoken a lot about mitigation already. You might tell I love some mitigation because it means that you don't have as bad of a disaster effect in the long run. But this slide reviews some common repairs that you might leverage that disaster mitigation of the component of the loan for. For example, you might install hurricane roof straps. You might even relocate outside the floodplain. You might install window film to prevent shattered glass injuries if you're dealing with earthquakes out in California. So there are lots of different things that you can apply that up to 20% piece of the loan if you elect to take it out on the mitigation front. So on the next slide, we'll talk about how to apply for an SBA disaster loan. So you can do this online at the SBA loan portal, lending.sba.gov, in person at a business recovery center or a disaster recovery center. And these business recovery centers and disaster recovery centers, these are temporary locations that are usually stood up until the physical damage loan application deadline is up in declared areas. We try to have some ground presence, usually until that point. And you can also apply by mail. Most people, though, are applying online or in person at one of the recovery centers. On the next slide, this gets into deadlines. And we'll talk a little bit about deadlines for the Texas declarations in a moment, but you'll have 60 days from the declaration date to apply for a physical damage loan, and then 9 months from the declaration date to apply for an economic injury disaster loan. That 9 months is particularly important because sometimes you may not realize you've experienced economic injury to your business until a few months after the disaster hits and you're kind of gathering, you're taking inventory, you're realizing what you've lost. So that's why there's that longer time horizon on the economic injury side. Also in presidential declarations, and we've seen this happen here in Texas recently, FEMA may decide to extend the filing deadline for all federal programs, including SBA. So sometimes you might see this go out a little bit longer. So on the next slide, we'll get into the second step of the application process, and that's property verification and loan processing. So once you submit your application, an SBA rep will get in touch with you directly to verify damage. We'll also schedule a site visit with like a loss verifier if that's necessary. SBA will then process the file to get you a decision as quickly as possible. we had been seeing 7 to 10 days for home applications and 2 to 3 weeks for business applications. What I will say is that this spring and summer have been exceptionally busy weather-wise, so applications may take longer than this. You can also check the status of your application once you apply by logging into that My SBA loan portal, the same online portal if you applied there, or by calling the SBA Customer Service Center. And if you're approved, at that point, the loan documents will be sent to you as the borrower for closing. And then if you're declined, you'll be advised of your rights of appeal and what that process looks like. Finally, on the next slide, once your loan is closed, an initial disbursement of up to $25,000 is generally made within 5 days. And subsequent disbursements are generally made in installments to match the pace of construction. So major disaster declarations in Texas currently, there's 2. The first one is the severe storms, straight line winds, tornadoes, and flooding that happened between April 26th and June 5th of this year. This includes the derecho that affected the Houston area. And the physical damage deadline, this is really important. They've already had an extension for this. The physical damage deadline is indeed tomorrow, August 15th, 2024. Okay, so if you've had physical damage as a result of this event, please make sure you get that application in ASAP. If you have any questions about it, you can reach out to me afterwards. I'll put my email up there. On the economic injury side, you've got until February, right? That's that longer time horizon. So February 18th. But it never hurts to, if you're already feeling the economic injury, I always encourage folks to get that application in as soon as possible. Don't wait. For Hurricane Beryl, so that time frame was July 5th through July 9th. The physical damage application deadline, we're looking at October 10th. And then the economic injury deadline will be April 14th of 2025. So feel free to take a picture of this, take a screenshot. These are the best resources if you have questions about your disaster loan application or disaster loans in general. There's that customer service center number. You can also reach out via email to disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. At the end of the presentation, you'll also get my email, and I can help point you in the right direction if you're wanting to talk to an actual human ASAP via email. But these folks pick up as well, and we're committed to getting you guys the best service possible. All right, some tools to make your business more resilient. So there are 2 resources that I wanted to highlight to y'all today. One is the SBA Business Resilience Guide, and this is hot off the presses. We just published this, and this goes over anticipating impacts of a disaster on operations to your business so that disruptions can be minimized. And then there's this really great Texas-based resource that was a result of a public-private partnership between a few different entities, Texas State University being one of them, I think Texas Mutual as well, the Dallas Fed. And this helps Texas small businesses prepare for, respond to, and recover from natural disasters and other unpredictable events. And it also connects businesses to experts in their local area, state.
Also, I want to chime in here too, Dylan. For those who will receive this deck, these links are clickable, so it'll take you directly to these websites.
Great note, Ben. Appreciate it. So yeah, and the clickable link kind of carries through these next slides. So the Business Resilience Guide that SBA has put together really focuses in on reducing vulnerabilities to climate impacts and how to translate this knowledge into business resilience. So it discusses changes in government policies that will be required to modify the current trajectory of increased storms that we're seeing. And SBA and other agencies are actively examining their policies to see how they can better address resilience. So on the next slide, we're really seeking with this guide to encourage small businesses to take steps on their own with the support of this guide to be more resilient operationally and physically. And the fact of the matter is that even the best run small business can be impacted by a disaster. You know, some businesses cope with disaster adversity better than others. So, they may be less disrupted by an event. They may resume operations sooner. They recover faster. They adjust for the future based on their experience. And these are the types of businesses that we describe as resilient. And there are other guides available online for how to address resiliency, but some of them can be kind of intimidating. And we wanted our guide to be very accessible, easy to follow. And this approach is also more tailored to small businesses than if you do a Google search, for example, for business resilience as it relates to disasters, you're going to get a lot of like corporate resources that might be thrown at you, and this is really targeted towards small businesses. So this next slide. So let's just go to the next one. This lays out how the business resilience guide is structured. So there's 5 sections. You want to start off by looking at what your current state is, identifying critical relationships. You'll hear folks in disaster recovery and even response talk about how important it is to have these relationships stood up in blue skies, so between disasters, so that you can lean on them and make quick phone calls during gray skies, during when the disaster's occurring. It talks about safeguarding resources, addressing financial matters, and in general, just becoming more resilient. I talked already about mitigation on the next slide, so we'll go past that. But I did want to highlight the low to no cost ways that we can get at resiliency. So Ben, if you could skip ahead 2 slides, that'd be great. There we go. So these are some suggestions that we like to make to small businesses as they're thinking about resilience. And now's a great time to think about resilience, right? We just had 2 big disasters that affected, if they didn't affect your business, maybe they affected some folks that you know. So it's a good time to sort of use that energy and focus in on what you can do in a low cost or no cost way. So practicing call down lists for fire drills with employees, making sure that you've got some kind of call down list, both physically perhaps, but also backed up in the cloud to access when a disaster does hit. Documenting existing assets for insurance purposes and making sure all that documentation's in one place. As I mentioned, using cloud storage as a backup for a lot of these things. Creating redundancies like training more than one employee in a business process. So cross-training effectively. Let's say, one employee is, their whole neighborhood's flooded, they can't get to work that day. It's always great to have another employee be able to fill in. Identifying alternatives like secondary suppliers or transportation routes. Ensuring existing financial tracking system can record expenses that might be reimbursable. Lots of need for reimbursable expenses during a disaster, especially when we're talking about insurance. Identifying a potential backup workplace and registering as an approved vendor for government procurement in order to fully participate in disaster recovery. And this is where we start to see my world and David's world start to overlap a little bit. There's so many different things that SBA does in, outside of the disaster context, and we also offer, no cost counseling. If you're worried about your credit score going into disaster season, you can talk to someone about getting your credit score up so that you do become eligible for an SBA loan. This vendor procurement piece is huge because it is a process, right? So, a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast this year, you may not have had the time to go through that process in order to be an eligible vendor. But maybe by the time next year rolls around, you'll be approved as a vendor and you can tap into those federal contracts. Next slide. So before, during, after, very quickly, I love this resource. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask Ben to click into it, but I do want you to know what it does. So it provides you a readiness roadmap. It's a super Texas-specific, easy-to-use interface, and it outlines essential steps for small business to prepare before a disaster strikes. It's very intuitive. They also did something really cool where like the user interface is designed so that it uses the least amount of power possible on your devices in case there's a power outage. So they really were thoughtful about how they built this. And it features local, regional, state, and national organizations to help communities rebuild. And again, it's business specific. So please go. Actually, Ben, just to give people the visual, maybe click on it, and we won't spend too much time, but just so they know what they're looking at, if that's okay. I'm improvising a little bit today.
Yeah, I may have to change my screen share, so bear with me here. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No,
We can
you're
come-
fine. I think I figured it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Okay. Yep. So it's broken up into before, during, and after. And you just take it tile by tile. It's really intuitive, easy to use. I highly recommend coming here. I shared it with a friend of mine who is a small business owner, and he has actually found it super helpful. So highly, highly encourage you guys to come and check out this website.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks great. It looks very clean too.
Yeah. And it's all
Yeah, there you
Texas. So
Texas Mutual. There you go. Okay, let me go back to the deck here.
thank you, sir.
Yep. Okay.
All right, back on pieced. All right, so the next section here is the whole of SBA approach to disaster recovery, right? So you heard me talking about how SBA across the board, not just on the disaster side of the house, can support businesses to be more resilient in the face of more frequent and more intense disaster events. And we've adopted this whole of SBA approach internally, and that's what we're calling it, to look at all of those different resources, and we're discussing how we might coordinate and leverage those resources to help businesses in disaster-prone areas and in areas that have been affected by disaster. So the next slide, there are the 4 C's. Dave had a slide similar to this, so I always think it's good to repeat it though. It's counseling, capital, contracting, and crisis. I've been talking about the crisis side. Counseling, capital, and contracting, though, are really, really important because this is what SBA does when there's not a disaster declaration on the ground. But these resources can still be really helpful in the context of disaster. And on the next slide, we'll go a little bit more deep into how we do this. So from helping businesses pivot after disaster, maybe like a catering company's kitchen was flooded and they want to explore launching a food truck to bring in revenue during the repair process, to leveraging our disaster, or rather not disaster, our resource partners to obtain education and training courses about disaster risks and finances. This is all about leveraging SBA's steady state existing programs to support survivors and make disaster-prone communities more prepared and resilient. Our resource partners on the next slide are fantastic. It's a really great set of things that you can lean on right now. So SCORE provides sector-specific topical business guidance, training, and customized mentoring programs. The VBOX, the Veteran Business Outreach Center, they provide entrepreneurial development services to veterans and their families. The Small Business Development Centers, or SBDCs, they have all of the services under their belt. So, advice on related to technical assistance. They also help folks apply for SBA loans and make sure they've got their ducks in a row. They'll provide all sorts of counseling. And also talk to you if you're not currently an entrepreneur, but you want to get something started, sort of those pre-venture, pre-seed, conversations can happen with the SBDCs. And then the women's business centers, kind of similar to the SBDCs, with a focus on women who want to start, grow, and expand their small business. But they do also, it's not exclusive to women, so anyone can go in there as well, but they do target their outreach to women. We also have U.S. Export Assistance Centers, which I think in Texas is important to highlight. So these offer companies with a full range of expertise in international trade and assistance with planning, accessing, promoting, and expanding export capabilities. And then we've got Apex accelerators, which help small businesses seek out government opportunities as it relates to contract procurement and small business certification. All right. So we support communities in recovering from disasters and building resilience through additional innovative public-private partnerships. These are just a few of them. So we've got partnerships with the Big City Emergency Managers Organization, Strategic Alliance memorandum with the Private Sector Emergency Management Association. We talk a lot with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. We're in touch with a lot of the chambers and the Central U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And, this is just to show that like our outreach efforts expand beyond, just government to government relationships, right? We're really trying to build partnerships on the ground with organizations that represent your interests as well. So the whole of SBA recovery and resilience, just in a nutshell, again, it's making sure that all of our available non-disaster focused SBA resources and resource partners are coordinated to support communities affected by disasters. And then part of my job is I'm facilitating recovery and resilience efforts for businesses impacted by disasters, and then looking at other resources in the community that might be available to you. So for example, just today in Harris County, I was reading about some property tax relief available to businesses affected by the disaster, and talking to folks about how we get the word out to folks that we're talking about SBA disaster loans to make sure that they have that information in their back pocket. Next slide. So let's see. How are we good on, how much time do you want for questions, Ben?
I mean, we're good. So if you want to, maybe we can probably give them about 10 minutes. So you have about 12 more minutes left. Okay.
So regional recovery coordinators, quickly, if you go to the next slide, just to give you a visual on what this looks like. We've got a number of people across the country by federal region. So I'm in region 6, which includes Texas. If you happen to have operations in any of these other states and you want to talk to a regional recovery coordinator in that state, I'd be happy to put you in touch. These are great folks. We are a relatively new team at SBA. Like I said, we're trying to bring together all of these different components of SBA and working very, very closely with our friends at the district office to make sure that we do that effectively. So this is a map of where we're all at. And on the next slide, we've got what exactly it is that we do. So Ben alluded to this in my intro, but the regional recovery coordinator position is really charged with providing a more localized pre and post disaster point of contact for people in the community to, will answer questions and support your needs at a multi-state or regional level when it comes to disaster. And we're also available, and this hasn't really been the case before, or at least not in a formal sense, we're available between disasters, right? So historically, we've deployed the disaster loan program. We'll come with a bunch of people on the ground. And then once that deadline passes, we're obviously, servicing the loan applications, but there's not quite the same level of contact that you might see now that you've got regional recovery coordinators in the mix. And then we're coordinating with key stakeholders and vested interests on the impact of disasters on businesses and the economy, focusing on leveraging tangible resources to support recovery and resilience. So I'm in touch with counterparts at the local level when it comes to economic development, making sure that we're all talking together about what a community's recovery looks like. And then this is my contact information if you have any questions. And we can go to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dylan. It looks like we have a question from Maria here in the chat. What are the deadlines on trying to get a loan once a disaster hits? So do we want to go back to a few more slides to cover that
Yeah,
declaration
sure.
deadline?
Yeah, let's give them the visual too. So great question, Maria. Appreciate it. So generally speaking, we're looking at 60 days from the declaration to apply for physical damage. Sometimes FEMA will extend that. And then we're looking at 9 months from the declaration date for the economic injury application. So for example, for the spring storms, which includes the derecho in Houston, tomorrow is the application deadline for that disaster. And then we'll have the economic injury deadline in February. And then for Beryl, we're looking at October 10th and April 14th of next year.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. A question from Madison. Can you explain more about the property tax relief for the Houston area? We have a lot of people from that area on this call today, so I think that'd be great to touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, Madison, I learned about it today as well. So HCAD, it sounds like, is providing some property tax relief to the Houston area. That's, you know, a local government thing. But I can certainly, if you pop your email in the chat, I can send you the same resources that I was looking at earlier today.
Awesome, thank you. Another question we have, I know we mentioned it was fairly a lower interest rate, probably than the market average, but one of our attendees is asking, what is the typical interest rate and term of an SBA loan? Let me go back a couple of slides because I think that information was there as well.
I'm not
right
sure
here.
I put it in. If you click on, well, Corey, you probably know these off the top of your head.
I do. Interest rates for businesses is 4% and fixed at 3.25% for nonprofits. One thing I did want to add, and since we have a number of Houston business owners, restaurant owners that are on this call, one unique thing about the SBA program is that since we have 2 declarations for Harris County, a business owner could technically apply under the derecho for economic injury and get up to $25,000 there, and then they can also get up to $25,000 for Hurricane Beryl. So instead of getting a $50,000 secured loan, they can actually get 2 $25,000 each secured loans. So it's the same amount of capital that's available for that business owner without pledging the collateral. So I know one of the things that's always mentioned is like, oh, Dylan, Corey, I would love to have more, access to capital, but I don't want to pledge collateral. So this is an option. I just wanted to put that out there because a number of the same counties exist for the derecho as well as Beryl. So I wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Corey. It's very insightful. One question I had, since it seems to appear that the loans are a hot topic, what are some common ways for business owners to not get approved for one of these loans?
Great question. Yeah, Corey.
Well, we do look at credit history and we look at repayment ability. So those are the 2 main categories. But remember, a no is never a final no, because if someone happens to be declined, they can actually apply for reconsideration. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. They can apply for reconsideration within a 6-month period. So that's actually a good, opportunity to realize that no is never final no. And that's why we have our resource partners such as the Women's Business Center, Small Business Development Center, our Veterans Business Outreach Center to work with the businesses during this period, because if it is credit, they can, if they show that they paid a collection or they show that they got an account back up to current status, those can all be information to overcome our decision.
Something else we're doing, thank you, Corey. Something else we're doing proactively now is where folks may be borderline on their credit score. We're proactively reaching out to those borderline folks and talking to them about reconsideration. And, our boss likes to give an example. In Selma, Alabama, a business went from a no to $400,000 in financing just because of those reconsideration efforts. So I think Corey brings up a great point. If you are declined, let's talk about reconsideration. Let's talk about ways to get your application up to a point that it is eligible.
Yeah, that's great. Seeing if there's any more questions in the chat. Doesn't appear to be. Dylan, David, Corey, and Nessa, do you have any final comments before we wrap this webinar up? Oh, wait, we have one more. Hold on one second. So if the loan term is for 15 years, what will happen if we sell the business in 10?
I'll go ahead and take that, Dylan. So our loans are amortized, figured out. It's up to 30 years. And keep in mind that there's no prepayment penalty. However, if it is a secured loan, keep in mind that, whatever collateral it's secured by, that may have to be satisfied before we close out the debt. So if it's real estate and you sell that property, SBA will have a lien on that particular property. So just be aware that, that's kind of a case-by-case basis, but, it just depends on the collateral that's used to obtain the loan.
Thank you, Corey. Well, SBA team, I'll pass it off to you all for some final comments, and then I'll wrap us up.
Thanks, Ben. So I want to give a quick shout out again to the TRA team to put this webinar together and hope that we can continue collaborating. And to Dylan and Corey, appreciate y'all taking time out of your schedules to inform the members of TRA. We want to try to get ahead of it too. So I know that a Hurricane Beryl just hit, but going back to Hurricane Harvey, I got to see firsthand a lot of the small businesses on their feet against the wall there that they could no longer sustain operations. And so we're trying to educate now before the disasters strike, so they're a step ahead of what takes place. When do I go talk to FEMA? When do I talk to the Small Business Administration? So we're here for you. I did drop my district office web link on here, so if you have any questions regarding anything, if it's disaster, business counseling services, we're here to support you. And I see that one of my colleagues actually joined the chat too, District Director Dante Acosta out of El Paso. So El Paso is also on the call. So if you want to reach out to those folks, any way we can help you out, we're here for you.
Thanks so much, David. And yeah, huge shout out to the Texas Restaurant Association for allowing us to jump on here today. As a Houstonian, I do know that, when it comes to Beryl, right, the main pain that a lot of people felt, there was definitely physical damage, right? But a lot of us felt the power outage for many days. So if your business was affected by the power outage, and you lost inventory, and you can tie back economic injury, or you can tie back economic injury to the power outage, that is another reason to explore an SBA loan. So I just wanted to highlight that for folks.
Thank you, Dylan. And thank you to the rest of the SBA team. Thank you all for attending today's webinar and spending your afternoon with us. We will be following up with you all with the recording of this webinar, along with some valuable resources that they provided today, along with the websites and some contact information. So again, it's been a fantastic wealth of knowledge. Knock on wood, hopefully we don't have another natural disaster occur anytime soon, but at least we can provide you with the resources to help you feel prepared. Again, thank you to the SBA team. Thank you to the attendees today. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon, and we'll follow up in an email. Take care, everybody.